The Austrians failed to make any significant progress, lost a number of battles, and when Joseph II died in 1790, sued for a separate peace. The Russian army was advancing.
So much for that. Who needs a friend when you have this?
But the Ottomans...
Suggestion to me, for me, by me, how Russia planned to restore Byzantium in the 18th century. A lot of people wanted me to react to
Most of the historical plans to restore the Roman Empire placed their authors as the new Roman emperors. From Charlemagne to Mussolini, the wannabe restorers envisioned themselves at the helm of the Rome reborn, basking in all the glory and prestige that comes with it. But there is one...
All right, 17 seconds and I already have something to say. Okay, so I actually learned something interesting, learned something new actually. So before, I thought Rome was like a ethnic group. I thought Romans were were an ethnic group. And I kind of feel stupid that I now didn't clock this a long time ago, didn't realize this, I should better say, a long time ago. But Rome, it wasn't an ethnic group. It was just a nationality. It was basically just a nationality, right? It's basically like how, if you actually take Russia, for example, you have Slavic people, and then you have like Russia, like the national. I think there's actually two words for it to describe what I'm trying to explain. English doesn't have it, but if you know Russian, you should know what I mean. There's two words for it. One is basically like a nationality. You're like a Russian national, right? But then it's like you're like an ethnic, right? Ethnic Russian. Basically, they're distinct. One is political, the other one is more cultural. But I do not know the ethnicities of the Italian peninsula in the Roman era. That's why I always just assumed that Roman just meant. I thought Romans was just the ethnicity of that group of people. They spoke Latin, their own unique language. I don't know if anybody else spoke that language or not. Like, I don't know, like the Etruscans or the Samnites. I don't know if those people were like similar to the Romans, the people who become the Romans. I have no idea. The Romans did start out as a tribe, right? I don't know. There's a lot that I do not know, to be honest. If you want to try and enlighten me in the comments down below, definitely do. Enlighten me. All right, let me stop talking already.
Particular restoration plan that stands out. It's comparatively pragmatic, not overly ambitious, and doesn't even put the planner on the empire's throne. This unique plan is known as the Greek project of Catherine the Great. The 18th century was the time of Russian ascendance. The country entered the 1700s as the backwater of Europe. Its access to the Baltics was blocked by the powerful Swedish Empire. To the west was the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, ever eager to challenge the Russians for dominion over the lands along the Dnieper River. To the south, the Black Sea was more of an Ottoman lake. Its southern shores were controlled by the Sublime Porte directly, while the northern banks were the domain of its vassal, the Crimean Khan. But in the first half of the 18th century, Russia has gained an upper hand over 2 out of 3 of its major rivals.
All right, so before we continue here, every time I see people, argue what Crimea and all that, right? They always like to be, actually, the people who originally lived in Crimea were actually Crimean Tatars. It wasn't really like Russians or Ukraine. Look, bro, I get it. I think I said this before in my other reaction. Like, yes, I know what the Crimean Tatars are. I think anybody who's, learning the history of Crimea should know what the Crimean Tatars are. However, unfortunately, they were deported. Okay, Stalin deported them in 1944, and it's unfortunate what happened to them. I actually looked into the history of the Crimean Tatars and what happened to them. Of course I did, because I like Russia. Of course, I'm gonna look in the history of the region. Duh. And it is what it is. There is nothing else that you can say to that. Like, it is what it is. It shouldn't have happened, but history happened, right? I mean, look at East Prussia. East Prussia, what happened to East Prussia shouldn't have happened, in my personal opinion. It places German for like 600 years, right? Until the Soviets came and changed that. Deported all the Germans back to Germany, right? So much so that after the fall of the USSR, the Soviet Union collapsed. Germany didn't even want it back because, it was like, yeah, no, this place isn't even German anymore. It's like, why would we take that back? It's like, yeah, no, that's all gone. Like, it doesn't really matter anymore. Like, all of it is gone. It's like, why would, that's more of a hassle now. It's basically the same thing with Crimea now. It's like, all the Tartar, most of it, some Tartars are still left over, but vast majority is gone. Like, what do you want to do, right? So, I'm just pointing that out because every time I, hear people bring up, oh, but the Crimean Tartars, bro, dude, be quiet. It's like, dude, they're not even in the conversation. They're not in the conversation, right? Like, yes, I watched a whole documentary of one Crimean Tartar who went all the way back to Crimea, actually, and visited the was it Russian Ukrainian family? I don't know. One of them visited a family that lives in her old house that she was deported from. Her relatives, her family was deported from, right? And it's like, it's like, wait, what can you do now? There's absolutely nothing you can do. Like, two wrongs doesn't make a right. You can't just go and just get those people to leave their houses now. Like, no, dude. So no, Crimea Tartars are absolutely irrelevant to Crimea now. I'm sorry, like, they don't really have the means to go back there, and they're not really gonna go back there. And even if they do go back there, it's not anytime soon. So no, Crimean Tatars are just out of the question, out of the conversation. Please, bro. If you're one of those people who do that, just stop. Okay, let's continue.
Sweden was decisively defeated in the Great Northern War and effectively ceased to be a great power. Poland was neutralized through diplomatic influence, to a point where Russian rulers had a final say in electing the next Polish king. The remaining big target was the mighty Ottoman Empire. And the Ottomans were no longer as mighty as they were at the time of Mehmed and Suleiman. The empire wasn't the sick man of Europe yet, but it started showing some signs of weakness. Ever since their defeat at the hands of the Holy League in the Great Turkish War, the Ottomans were struggling to reassert themselves on the European stage. The Janissary loyalty was declining, the revolts were springing up in the provinces, and the newly resurgent Persia was threatening the eastern frontiers. However, the Sublime Porte was still a force to be reckoned with, and possessed the biggest army in Europe. The first round of the Russo-Turkish Wars in the 18th century ended inconclusively.
Bro, still though, I do know that. Oh my gosh, dude. Oh, this is where it begins. Russia's bullying of the Ottoman Empire. Oh, dude, I can hear all the Turkish people crying in my comments already. All the ultra-nationalist Turks crying in my comments already.
The sum total of Russian gains on the Black Sea was the fortress of Azov, and even that one was forbidden from being fortified by the treaty signed in 1739. When Catherine II ascended the Russian throne, the empire's progress on its southern strategic goal was fairly unimpressive. But the new Russian empress herself, on the other hand, was very impressive. Catherine, born Sophia Frederica Augusta, came to rule Russia after overthrowing her unpopular husband Peter III. The imperial couple were both German by birth, but unlike Peter, Catherine embraced the faith and customs of Russian people, which earned her the support of both the populace and the nobility. The new empress was ambitious and
So I always find it interesting how, you have this weird dynamic relationship of, like, for example, right? England, let's take England for example. England for a while was ruled by essentially French dynasty, pretty much, for a while, up until the 100 Years' War, pretty much. Basically, like, you get this weird dynamic situation where you have a foreign power ruling over foreign peoples. And you could draw a parallel with Russia and that as well. Like, because the amount of German influence in Russia, it's quite staggering. Especially, well, I should more say the German influence with the aristocracy, the upper class and whatnot. It's very staggering and would be a bit of a irony to come to think about it, actually, now that I think about it. If you use hindsight, really and truly. But damn, what was I gonna say? I don't know, I kind of left my head. I ain't gonna lie. I was gonna say something along the lines of, you'd think that Russia would have more like a Slavic, more pure Slavic ruler system or Slavic ruling system, but no, it's shockingly to me, Russians are very xenophobic. I think that's the word I'm looking for. Russia is not really xenophobic. Like, that's something I've noticed. It's not really xenophobic, really and truly.
Energetic and well-educated. Her ascension marked the beginning of the Golden Age for the Russian Empire. Catherine's reign started with a diplomatic victory in Poland. In 1764, the Empress managed to get her former favorite, Stanislav Poniatowski, elected to the Polish throne with the backing of the Russian army. The Polish nobility were split in their support of the new king. The cornerstone of the disagreements was the dissident question, the issue of the rights of non-Catholics within the Commonwealth. Russia and Prussia were pushing for more rights for the Orthodox and the Protestants, while France and Austria were opposing this reform. In February 1768, Russian ambassador Nikolai Repnin forced the Sejm to pass the Religious Tolerance Act in exchange for a constitutional guarantee from Catherine. This triggered a revolt from the part of the Polish nobility in opposition to the king and the Russian influence. With the diplomatic backing of Austria and France, they formed a confederation at the town of Bar, near the Polish-Ottoman border. The heavily outnumbered Confederates couldn't withstand the combined forces of the king's loyalists and the Russian army, and were desperate for foreign support. Austria and France weren't eager to join, so the only option on the table was the Ottoman Empire. In June 1768 of the same year, the fortress of Bar was taken by the Russian forces. When the defeated Confederates fled across the Ottoman border, the Zaporozhian Cossacks followed in pursuit and created a diplomatic incident. Egged on by the Austrian and the French envoys, the Sultan used this as a pretext to imprison the Russian ambassador, which amounted to a declaration of war. But the war did not go the Sultan's way. He and his ally, the Crimean Khan, could field bigger armies, but they had nothing to answer the superior artillery coordination of the Russians. On land, the Turkish forces suffered a series of defeats and lost several key fortresses. At sea, the expeditionary fleet of Alexei Orlov reached the Aegean and destroyed the entire Ottoman force sent to stop him in the Battle of Chesma. For the next 4 years, Orlov's force became a nightmare for the Turks. They blocked the straits, sparked revolts in Morea, Egypt and the Levant, and even managed to capture Beirut.
Bro!
Austria
They captured, dude. Like I know how much Russia has whooped Turkey's, or should I say, the Ottoman Empire. I should say the Ottoman Empire. But like, holy moly, I didn't know it was that bad, bro.
Russia's entrance into the war on the Sultan's side might have turned the tides, but Catherine managed to secure the Habsburg neutrality with the first partition of Poland. By 1774, the war situation was hopeless for the Ottomans. The Treaty of Küçükçayırcı that ended the hostilities marked a major blow to Turkish influence and prestige. At the same time, this war was a huge victory for Russia.
I can hear the Turks
being started by the
crying.
Ottomans. The Empress
I can hear the Turks crying in my comment section, writing paragraphs after paragraphs, co-oping. Oh my
broke the
goodness.
Sultan's stranglehold on the Black Sea, gaining 2 coastal outlets at the mouth of the Dnieper and on the Kerch Peninsula in Crimea. The Ottomans had to renounce their suzerainty over the Crimean Khanate and to allow the passage of Russian ships through the straits. This privilege was also extended to the Orthodox Christians within the Ottoman Empire, who could now sail under the Russian flag and enjoyed the protection of St. Petersburg. These included the Moldavians and the Vlachs in the Danubian principalities, and most notably, the Greeks. The Greeks played a unique role in the war. I have already mentioned the revolt in Morea, sparked by the arrival of Alexei Orlov and his fleet. This was one of the major events of the war. It distracted the Ottoman forces and helped the Russian army advance on other fronts. The Orlov rebellion was suppressed after a year of fighting, but it succeeded in establishing diplomatic connections between the Russian imperial court and the Greeks of the Peloponnese and the Aegean. During the war, Alexei Orlov even established a so-called Grand Duchy of Archipelago, a semi-official state consisting of 18 islands, with its own laws, tax code, and school system.
Bro, oh my goodness, dude. No way, bro. Wait. So basically, Russia just had a habit of just creating states out of other states and just get. Russia was just always doing that. Okay. Oh my goodness, man. If you don't get the joke, that's it's related to the whole Donetsk and Luhansk Republic. But
in the
let's
following
continue.
years, thousands of Hellenic immigrants moved to Russia, and many prominent Greeks assumed offices in the imperial administration. This created lines of communication, which provided a significant strategic advantage. Russia could now foment unrest in the Orthodox regions of the Ottoman Empire more easily, in case of another confrontation with the Sublime Porte. And such a confrontation was sure to come. Catherine's ambitions far exceeded a couple of ports on the Black Sea. Without direct control of the straits, Russian shipping and trade could never be fully secure. With the first phase of the southern thrust now complete, the Empress set her sights on the Bosphorus. But the role that the Greeks played in Catherine's plans wasn't purely geopolitical. Catherine's reign was also marked with a fascination with Greek culture. The Empress was a woman of the Enlightenment, and like many of her friends, loved classical antiquity. The Greek influx into the empire played well into it. Many Hellenic scholars and artists were invited to the Russian capital to share their knowledge and skills. Russian architecture and art of this period were inspired by Hellenistic and Byzantine traditions.
Aha! I knew, bro. I knew every time I saw those gorgeous Russian buildings, I was like, wow, this looks very, very, very Greek. This looks very Hellenistic. I knew it. But it's weird because the West kind of uses Greek architecture as well. I think in America used like the White House and like if you look at Capitol Hill, all of that is actually Greek architecture. Although I like the way how Russia does their Greek architecture inspiration. It looks way more gorgeous, really and truly. I gotta see that in person, bro. I got to see that. I gotta see it. Seriously, it's like one of the reasons why I want to visit Russia, because I want to see the beautiful, vibrant architecture in person, man. It's absolutely like, it just looks so gorgeous, really and truly.
Cities founded in the newly acquired territories were given Greek names. Kherson was founded in the mouth of the Dnieper, bearing the same name as the ancient Greek colony, where Prince Vladimir received his baptism, starting the Christianization of the
Holy
roots.
crap, we are
The
getting...
Crimean trading port of Kaffa was given back its historical name Theodosia. Colonies with names like
Wait, holy crap, we're getting the freaking lore of all these southern cities in what's now Ukraine.
Mariupol, Stavropol, and others sprung around the Azov Sea coast and the Pontic steppe, and became the new homes of many Greek immigrants.
Nah, that's insane, bro. You know, it's funny, right? Because I saw a comment a while ago from a Russian person, right, on my video. And he literally looked at me and he was like, bro, just go out to any Ukrainian person and ask them what cities have Ukraine built. And they wouldn't be able to answer it, bro. And it's like, seriously, like what cities have Ukraine actually built? Like, bro, all of Ukraine is basically just handed to it. Aside from maybe like what, Kyiv or Kiev, I don't know how the hell you want to pronounce. I mean, I should be pronouncing it as Kiev because, you know, I'm supposed to be more pro-Russian, but honestly, whatever. I used to pronounce it as Kiev, but then, you know, freaking whatever. Like, I just heard more people say it's actually pronounced Kiev, whatever. It doesn't matter. Kiev. I think Kiev sounds better, to be honest, than freaking Kyiv. I always hated saying Kyiv, but it sounds weird. But it's like, dude, what cities has, oh, bloody hell, my back, god damn, oh my goodness, my back hurts. Oh my goodness. But I was saying, man, oh yeah, Ukraine, and yeah, Ukraine. Like, I've never really seen a city that Ukraine's unironically like built for.
This Greek naming fashion even found its way into the Romanov imperial dynasty. The first grandson of the empress was named Alexander. In her correspondence, Catherine revealed that his name was inspired by both the Russian warrior saint Alexander Nevsky and the legendary king of Macedon. Russian poet and senator Gavril Derzhavin composed a poem in his honor called "To the Purple-Born Child of the North," purple-born being the ancient epithet of the Byzantine emperors. Catherine's second grandson's name was chosen to be even more conspicuous. "They asked me who's going to be the godfather," writes Catherine in her autobiography. "I said only my best friend Abdul Hamid can fit this role. But since it's improper for a Turk to baptize a Christian, at least we can honor him by naming the baby Constantine." Constantine was an unusual name for a member of the Romanov dynasty, but it was the most popular name of the Eastern Roman emperors. For the Greeks, Constantine was the name of both the founder of Constantinople and the last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI. The reincarnation of the Marble King was fabled to herald the restoration of the empire. Of course, now the city of Constantine was ruled over by the Ottoman Sultan Abdul Hamid, whom Catherine mockingly calls "my best friend" in her notes. Young Constantine Pavlovich was slated to receive...
Oh my... Oh, Catherine got jokes. Oh my goodness, bro. Oh, that's another thing that I like about Russian people. They actually they're hilarious. Like, they're actually hilarious as hell. Like, it's some of the funniest people I've ever met in my life, bro.
If a Hellenic upbringing. Even his wet nurse was a Greek woman. At the feast celebrating the birth of Constantine, the choir sang songs in ancient Greek to the guests, many of whom were foreign dignitaries. The only more obvious way to signal the intention to take Constantinople would have been to say it out loud. The foreign diplomats, however, weren't too enthusiastic about Catherine's ambition. Sweden and Prussia were wary of the growing Russian might. Other European powers might also have had something to say about the unchecked expansion in the Black Sea region. But despite these concerns, the Empress thought that the time was ripe for such an endeavor. The attention of the Western Europe was focused on the American War of Independence. The Great Britain was trying its hardest
Holy
to put down the
moly!
revolt of the
Hold on a
13 colonies.
second. This was happening during the American War of Independence. What? Wait. Oh, bro. That's crazy to me. That is... Huh. I'm getting some questions answered that I've always asked. Because, you see, the American Revolution, and, obviously, that kind of ties into to my country's type of history, of course. This is one of the reasons why I even got into history in the first place. But one of my questions that I always had to myself was, what the heck is going on across the other parts of the world, like Eastern Europe and all that during the American Revolution? Looks like I'm about to get my question answered.
While France, Spain and the Netherlands were working to make it even harder for the Brits. The Prussian king Frederick II was getting old.
Bro, let me tell you something, right? Low-key, I hate when Americans say, we managed to beat out the British Empire. No, you didn't. You literally got carried by European power. You got carried by France, Spain, and Netherlands. Like, America would have lost the Revolutionary War. They were on track. They were literally on track to lose the Revolutionary War until France basically saved their butts, bruh.
And would not intervene on the Sultan's behalf without strong Western backing, according to Catherine's estimation. Plus, the Empress had just found a willing partner for her plans at the court of Vienna. But why would the Austrians be willing to ally with Russia? Wasn't Austria just recently trying to foil Catherine's plans in Poland and egging on the Ottomans to declare war on Russia? The reason for this pivot was the change in Austrian leadership. The previous head of the Habsburg family was Maria Theresa, and she wasn't overly fond of Catherine's Russia. She viewed the Orthodox Empire as a competition, and still held some grudge over the Russians quitting during the 7 Years' War. But the mother-in-law of all Europe was getting older, and was transferring more of the imperial responsibilities to her son and successor, Joseph II.
Bro, I can't blame her, bro. I can't blame her for what happened. Bro, if that freaking German fanboy, Peter III, just completely making Russia exit the war, bro.
Joseph had another vision for the future of Russo-Austrian relations. For him, Russia was a valuable partner in dividing the spheres of influence. In 1772, Joseph lobbied the Austrian entrance into the Tripartite Pact to partition Poland, and he remained in correspondence with Catherine ever since. It did not take long for them to find a common ground on the Eastern question. In 1780, Joseph and Catherine met in Mogilev to discuss their shared vision for the future of the Balkans. In November of the same year, Maria Theresa died, and Joseph assumed full control of Austrian foreign policy. In 1781, the alliance between Russia and Austria was formalized. The Ottomans now had to be on guard against both the northern and the western neighbor. To finalize the plan, Austria and Russia needed to determine who gets what in case of a victory over the Turks. Bickering over the spoils was the last things the Allies needed to distract them when the war would come. The Grand Chancellor of the Russian Empire, Alexander Bezborodko, presented Catherine with a memorial on political affairs, a document outlining the totality of Russian foreign policy. Among other things, he included different scenarios for carving up the Ottoman possessions in Europe between Austria and Russia. If the war between the Allies and the Sublime Porte would be going with moderate success, wrote Bezborodko, then it may be prudent to offer the Sultan peace on modest terms. According to these modest terms, Russia was supposed to get the Crimean Peninsula and all the lands and fortresses east of the Dniester, while Austria was to be given back their former possessions in the Balkans, ceded by the Treaty of 1739. In addition, Bezborodko proposed the creation of a buffer state on the Danube. This buffer state would have been formed out of Moldova, Wallachia and Bessarabia, and would be given the name Dacia. Essentially, this would have meant creating Romania some 80 years ahead of schedule. However, Bezborodko also had another plan. Here's what he wrote on this topic. But suppose the stubbornness of the Porte on one hand, and our successes on the other, would offer ways for the annihilation of Turkey, and the restoration of the Greek Empire with your Imperial Majesty's grandson at the helm. Here we'd also need to determine the exact...
No, I talked about this in one of my recent reactions where I talked about how it would be a stretch to call Greece Rome, or like, okay, it's weird because yes, the Roman Empire was literally Hellenized, which is very common, right? You know, when an empire conquers someone, you know, I've like done so much reactions on this where it's actually quite common where an empire conquers someone, and they typically tend to like just adopt their culture of you know, set of people that they usually conquer. Funny enough, so it's like, yes, the Roman Empire was Hellenized, but at the end of the day, you know, they were still Roman. Like, it was still a Roman Empire. It wasn't the Greek Empire. It was the Roman Empire. Like, you know, I can't really say that Greece will be the successor of Rome because, well, Greece, even though they you know, Greek culture dominated Rome, but politically speaking, Greece had nothing to do with, like, yes, I know that there will be a lot of Greek emperors and whatnot, but I'm saying, like, and I actually said this in the comment, Greece didn't like create Rome, right? It didn't create Rome or anything like that. Greece was actually conquered. The Romans conquered Greece. So it's like you can't really be the successor to someone who conquered you. You know, that's not how that works, right? That's why we don't call Russia the successor to the freaking Golden Horde, because the Golden Horde conquered Moscow. That's why, you know, it's more accurate to say like Russia's the successor to Kiev Rus, right? Because Moscow wasn't created during Kiev Rus. Yes, it was created when the Mongols came. However, I'm so terrible at explaining things. Kiev Rus didn't conquer Moscow or anything. No, Moscow was a city made during the times of the Mongols, and obviously the Rus people that were a part of Kiev Rus when it was conquered by the Mongols were still left over, and they created, you know, Moscow, and they were smart enough to eventually, you know, build up a big army and kick out the Mongols and, you know, become their own thing. In a long story short, you know, that's why we would say, you know, Moscow is the successor of, you know, Kiev Rus. But, you know, it's like Greek is like, yeah, sure, they dominated, but not any Romans. They were Greek Romans, yeah. Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah, definitely. They were Greek Romans. basically Greeks who were Romanized, but then got Hellenized because the Romans were become Hellenized themselves, and so they would basically be Roman, but they were Greeks, and then they would basically just practice. It's weird, dude. Oh my gosh, this weird paradox between like Rome and the huge influence that Greek culture had on Rome and whatnot. Okay, this is why. Okay, this is much better. Let's use England, because France. This is why we don't say like England is like freaking France or whatever, right? Even because French would dominate the high court of English rulers for a long time, right? When the Normans conquered England, right? But English people were still always there. Well, they were still always English, even though before the 100 Years' War, French was like the language that the upper class knew. Everybody talks about. That's why there's so much French words in English now. I don't hear English people trying to call themselves France or like the successor to any French empire or anything French related. Like, no. It's basically like that. Actually, that's actually a good way to put it, if that makes sense. Although I would say that the closest thing to Rome probably would be Greece and Italy. Probably those two things, because Rome's capital would be moved over from Italy in that area of Greece anyway. So it's like oh my gosh, dude. Okay, I'm probably gonna talk more about this in a different video, but I can't talk too much now, bro. Let's continue.
Exact borders of the empire beforehand, assigning them in the Turkish possessions in Europe, as well as in the islands of the archipelago. We'd need to assume that the court of Vienna would like to have some privileges for their Mediterranean trade, that England, France and Spain may also demand some concessions, that the Republic of Venice would present their claim on Morea, which we shouldn't give them but better substitute it for some islands. It may be that France and Spain would intend to take ports in Egypt or elsewhere on the African coastline, for which we shouldn't be objecting much. The Empress evidently liked her minister's work. In a letter to Joseph II sent on the 21st of September 1782, she relayed his plans almost verbatim. The only difference for the first variant was that she didn't mention the fate of Crimea at all. Catherine planned to annex the Khanate before going to war, and didn't want to ask Joseph's permission to do so. Other than that, every point in Catherine's moderate variant goes in accordance with Bezborodko's memorial. The ambitious variant followed the Chancellor's outline as well. In case the two empires managed to expel the Turks from Europe, Catherine proposed the revival of the ancient Greek Empire, with her 3-year-old grandson as its emperor. Constantine would renounce all his claims on the Russian throne, and his empire would remain neutral in all affairs concerning Austria and Russia. Funnily enough, Constantine wouldn't have become the youngest Byzantine emperor, even if the whole thing happened the next day. The record of the 2-year-old Michael III was very hard to beat. According to the plan, Constantine's Neo-Byzantium would get the Ottoman possessions in Europe and the islands of the Aegean.
Also, the word Byzantine, it wasn't even used by actual Romans. That was just a weird word coined in early modern history that the actual Romans never used. That's like like no. I don't know, man. It's weird how people just kind of distort history and are somehow able to get away with it.
To appease Joseph, Catherine gave him a carte blanche on drawing the new empire's western border, so that the Habsburgs could claim as much of the Balkans as they wanted. On the 13th of November, Joseph sent Catherine a response. He did not object to the creation of Dacia in the Greek Empire, but he wanted to get a whole bunch of stuff in the Balkans: Hotin in Moldavia, Nikopol in Bulgaria, Belgrade with parts of Serbia, Albania, and just the whole of Bosnia. According to his plan, the border between Austria and Byzantium south of the Danube would be one of those classic straight lines, like the ones you see on the map of colonial Africa. Surely drawing a straight-line border in the Balkans wasn't going to create any problems in the future.
No problems at all,
To add to all those gains, Joseph was also planning to annex Istria and Dalmatia. The fact that Istria and Dalmatia were owned by Venice and not by the Ottomans didn't bother him much. He proposed to reimburse the Venetians by giving them Cyprus, Crete, Morea, and a couple of random islands in the Aegean. Truly, Joseph II was a geopolitical genius ahead of his time. Sadly, we'll never know what Catherine and her ministers thought of Joseph's visionary plan. The two monarchs never mentioned the issue in the mutual correspondence again. You can see that the point of contention between the plans of Bezborodko and of Joseph was Morea. Bezborodko was staunchly against giving it away to anyone except the restored empire, while the Habsburg wanted to use it as a bargaining chip in his own negotiations with Venice. Morea was the heartland of the Greek independence movement, so Bezborodko's stance on this question was much more reasonable and informed than what Joseph proposed. But even if they'd managed to polish out the details, the Austrian ambitions were disproportionate to their abilities. Plus, the perfect diplomatic conditions to put the plan in motion were quickly disappearing. The American War of Independence was winding down, and in January 1783, France, Spain, and Britain signed a treaty to end the hostilities. Catherine suspected that France was rushing to defend the Ottomans from the combined Russo-Austrian threat. The opportunity for an aggressive move was gone, so now the planners had to bait the Turks into declaring war themselves. The biggest test for the Sultan's patience came in 1783, when Russia annexed the Crimean Khanate. The Treaty of Küçük-Kaynarca guaranteed the independence and neutrality of the Khanate, but in reality it remained a diplomatic battleground. Both the Russians and the Turks were spending a lot of money and resources to get their preferred candidate into power, and both were accusing each other of interference. In 1783, Catherine decided to flip the board, intervened in the ongoing civil war in Crimea, and just annexed the peninsula into Russia. The Sultan didn't take the bait immediately, but in 1787, when the Empress went on tour around the Crimea, the Ottomans started issuing protests and demanding the restoration of the Khanate. Emboldened by the promises of backing from France and England, Abdul Hamid once again declared war on Russia. For Joseph and Catherine, this was the best chance to implement their designs.
This year,
while the Russians were again victorious on both land and sea, the performance of the Austrian army was less than stellar. The Austrians failed to make any significant progress, lost a number of battles, and when Joseph II died in 1790, sued for a separate peace. The Russian army was advancing.
So much for that. Who needs a friend when you have this?
But the Ottomans offered significant resistance, so the progress was slower than Catherine desired. Still, in a couple of years, the Turkish military was on its last leg. However, by this time, major Western powers like Prussia and Britain had started gathering forces to save the Sublime Porte from a complete collapse. The Austrian alliance should have been a precaution against this turn of events, but the Habsburg military had turned out not to be up to the task. With outside pressure mounting, Catherine decided to quit while ahead and be satisfied with some limited gains. The Ottomans were forced to recognize Crimea as the part of the Russian Empire and cede the lands east of the Dniester with the valuable fortress of Ochakov. The Russians secured all the lands they wanted for themselves, but no independent Byzantium or even Dacia were on the agenda this time around. The chance to revive the medieval Roman Empire on the Bosphorus was gone. With the ideas of the French Revolution sweeping across Europe, restoration of old empires was falling out of fashion. It is interesting to theorize what this Neo-Byzantium of Empress Catherine would have looked like. The information we have about Catherine's knowledge on the topic may give us some idea. The Empress was a big Roman history fan, but quite like most of the modern-day Romaboos, she was more interested in the classical empire rather than all that Byzantine stuff.
Interesting. Is he calling out those Roman history buffs? I personally think that the Eastern Roman Empire was a lot more cooler than the Western Roman Empire. I don't know. Is that like an unpopular opinion or something? Don't get me wrong. The rest of Roman Empire, you know, bloody hell, my back stiff as hell. But you know, I think the Eastern Roman Empire is cooler. I don't know. The color is cooler, architecture is cooler. I mean, everything about it is cooler in my opinion. I don't know.
Most historians just assume that her plan was supposed to be a revived Byzantium, because it would have been a Christian empire centered on Constantinople. But Catherine doesn't use the word Byzantium or Byzantine even once. She just calls it the Greek Empire. Catherine's idea of the medieval Roman state was a mix of knowledge about Greco-Roman antiquity and the old Russian image of
because the term Byzantine wasn't really a word. This is early modern history. This is like when the word was now first being used, actually, around this time period, somewhat, roughly
Byzantium
speaking.
as the source of the Orthodox Christianity. The Empress loved Roman history, but only the fun parts. She read Polybius and Plutarch, and even helped to translate a French book about Belisarius, but did not bother with any ancient sources on the laws and the administration. There were no books on Byzantine ceremonies and political structure in Catherine's library, but there was Procopius' Secret History, because that stuff is fun to read. The same applies to the culture and customs. Among other things, Catherine revived the old Roman tradition of victory titles in the Russian military. Her star generals and admirals had received the special award for the most impressive victories, like Suvorov of Rymnik, Potemkin of Tauria, and Orlov of Chesma. She thought that this had been a persistent tradition in Roman history, going back all the way to the likes of Scipio Africanus. But in reality, it's been abandoned after Heraclius, with few occasional exceptions. Catherine even wrote a historical play.
Damn! That's insane! That is insane!
Called The Early Reign of Oleg. One of its episodes describes the Russian prince's visit to Constantinople, and it's full of anachronisms. Emperor Leo entertains Oleg with classical Greek theater and Olympic Games. It's not quite Netflix Cleopatra level inaccurate, but would have still warranted a full-length debunking video. On the other hand, the Empress seems to have known a lot about the Varangian Guard. She had started to read Gibbon, but got bored by his Decline and Fall around volume 8, right at the beginning of the Byzantine era. All this reinforces the notion that Catherine only cared about the cool bits of Roman history.
But the Eastern Roman Empire was cool. What? How is the Eastern Roman Empire not cool? What? Am I missing something?
Disparity isn't surprising. Catherine, like most of her learned friends throughout Europe, valued classical Rome and Greece very highly. Many of them were excited to see their fellow enlightened monarch topple the decadent Ottoman Empire and establish a haven for classical culture in its place. Even Voltaire was cheering her on to restore the Greek Empire, probably more due to his dislike of the Ottomans, rather than his love for Byzantium. The medieval Eastern Rome, on the other hand, was only interesting to the Empress from the perspective of Russian history. She didn't commission any research into the Byzantine society for her Greek project, even though there were plenty of experts at her disposal. It all probably means that Catherine's Greek Empire would have been less of a revived Byzantium and more of an 18th century enlightened despotism with some Hellenistic flavor.
So basically, like how the Roman Empire was basically kind of just lost everything Roman eventually, and would just become a Hellenized, uh, basically what he said, but you know, a lot more Hellenistic flavor to it.
The Greek project of Catherine the Great did not pan out the way that the Empress wanted. Her grandson never sat on the throne of Constantinople. After Catherine died, and the turbulent years of the Napoleonic Wars had passed, the Russian emperors did not give up their struggle for influence in the Balkans. But in keeping up with the times, their new Balkan initiatives were driven more by popular principles like ethnicity and religion, rather than old dynastic claims. The 19th century Tsars positioned themselves as the protectors of the Slavs and the Orthodox people, so trading the lands of the Serbs and the Bulgars from one empire to another could not have been their policy. In 1780, Catherine II was content with giving all of Serbia to the Habsburgs. In 1914, Tsar Nicholas II had to decide what to do about the Habsburgs trying to annex Serbia, and we all know how that ended. Catherine's Greek project has a peculiar legacy. On one hand, it was an opportunistic plot to carve out buffer states in the Balkans, which was abandoned as soon as its parties got distracted by more important events. On the other hand, the Russians have succeeded in establishing a geographical, diplomatic, and cultural connection to the ancient cradle of their faith. The settlements established in those decades still stand today as the big urban centers of the region, populated by the Russians and the Ukrainians, but bearing the same Greek names. It also turned out to be a major influence.
Don't worry. At this rate, Ukraine is probably gonna just start, deleting the history of that to erase its Russian influence or whatever the hell. Yeah, my gosh, dude, I didn't want to talk about that and nonsense that's going on there. Like how freaking like Ukraine is trying to change, like actively changing its language or whatever to not sound Russian or whatever. Like I literally heard someone they change lemon. They literally changed the word lemon into something else. I didn't even know. Like lemon. Bro. Like, do you realize lemon isn't even a Russian word? Like, lemon is literally used in like so many different languages, but they still changed the word lemon to something else. And they're doing this to so much other stuff, dude. Like, freaking lemon, bro. Like, lemon. Wait, no. We have to change the word lemon to something else because it sounds too Russian.
But other languages have lemon in it too.
Oh my gosh, man. Oh my gosh, bro. Like, Ukrainsky ludi ni umni. Oh my god. Like seriously, bro. I don't know if y'all understood what I just said there. I don't know if you understood what I said. Go for you. But let's just continue.
The Greek independence movement. So while the stated geopolitical goals were not completely met, we shouldn't be underestimating its long-term effect by the lack of a flashy triumphal procession through the streets of Constantinople. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions left on the topic, feel free to put them in the comments. I'd like to give special thanks to my Patreon supporters, Mulai Cherkawi.
Man, I am tired as hell. Golly, man. Yes. Freaking so freaking tired. It's like probably like 12 a.m. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, though, make sure you like and subscribe if you like what I have to say, my reactions, man. Thank you so much for watching. go comment if you have any suggestions for me. Definitely do enjoy reacting to Russian history. Of course, learning more about Russia, Russian history, anything about Russia really and truly. If you got any reactions on that you would love me to see, definitely go tell me, because this is like one of the few things where I could genuinely sit here and talk a lot about, if you haven't realized. Make sure you check out my other Russia reactions, man. До свидания. Увидимся.